It's your boy, Philanthropy and Phocus is the name of the show. I always got to try to force myself to say the name of the show because I always start talking and 2 minutes go by and people go, where is this guy and what are we doing and why are we together? Philanthropy and Phocus is the name of the show. My name is Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector. And that's what it's all about. I've been on 3 phone calls this morning already with different nonprofits and a bunch of text messages with different leaders of nonprofits. And Tommy, I need this relationship. Can you help? Can you connect us? And I would say, of course. That's what a nonprofit sector connector does. Shout out, I just put a post up on social media because there is a picture of me in the background on the Long Island Herald. So check me out on LinkedIn, and I put it up on Instagram, TommyD.NYC. But my friends at Book Fairies out here in Long Island recently gave away their 4 millionth book. 4 millionth book. It was an idea that my friend Amy Zaslansky had many years ago. She was doing a book drive just for her local school that needed some books. And that turned into a nonprofit organization that has now put 4 million books in the hands of children and adults who need books. And hashtag let's figure out this literacy thing, gang, because so many social results come out of not being able to read, and we don't have the time for it now. Although maybe when Nancy, Harvey, and I are talking about it, will be relevant to the senior community like we're talking about right now. Nancy, I'm going to go on for 2 minutes, so I want to say hello to you for a second. Good morning, Nancy Harvey from SPOP. Good morning. How are you? Service program for older people. What's up?
I am doing well. Thank you. Happy to be here with you this morning.
I'm happy to have you here. I'm fired up. We got a lot to talk about, a lot to get into. One of my favorite topics to discuss is mental health and how we address it and how we end the stigma. We've been talking about that only since the beginning of the show. You know, in my second ever episode, Dr. Larry Grubler, Transitional Services for New York, TSINY, said to me, Tommy D, because that's my name. He said, Tommy D, we all need support at different times. And I think if we remember that as a society, as a human race, we also got to support the animals, but that's another show I do, the Professionals and Animal Lovers show. But when we're talking about it, we all need support at different times. We need to find love. We need to find compassion. I say those 4 lads from Liverpool taught us all those years ago, all you need is love. Well, you need a couple of things too. But I mean, if the baseline is love and compassion and real human decency for each other, I think the world becomes a better place. All right. So I was saying the 4 million books. I was making some text messages today, or I was making some posts this morning, spoke to a great woman who's doing some really cool stuff in philanthropy here on Long Island. More to come on all that. We'll be talking about it. I do want to make a shout out really quick. The way that Nancy Harvey and I get to connect is because since the inception of the New York City Imagine Awards, I have been involved. I'm an old school Long Island Imagine Awards guy. And since we've started the Imagine Awards in New York City, I've been involved. Nancy was a semifinalist in the process for the Imagine Awards. The finalists just came out. Nancy, I know you're going to be in the room with us anyway, because we made sure that we have tickets for people. So unfortunately, you did not make it to the finals. And I hate to start a show that way, but I want to reference it because it's the importance of community. I almost feel a little responsible that you're not a finalist because I wrote the write-up. So I feel like I didn't do a good job. So we're going to show and prove why this organization and you as a leader, from the purpose of seniors who have mental health issues, from the network that you've created. And I talk about networking all the time, but a network from a different sense, a network of providers, hospitals, senior community care centers in the community, and all this stuff. We're going to get into all that today. But I did want to just reference that if it's not for Ken Serini and then the Imagine Awards, you and I don't meet, candidly. Like that's how it works. So I appreciate you coming on to the show today. I have a lot to talk about with you. As we talked about, there's a couple of things I gotta sort of shout out right away. When I looked at your bio, my wife went to New Paltz, and while my wife was at New Paltz, my cousin Mickey and my buddy Danny were at Marist. So we spent some time up there on the Hudson, you know, back and forth, different sides. And I'm trying to think, because you got your BA at New Paltz, right? And you got your master's of social work from SUNY Albany. That is SUNY New Paltz, everybody. I don't know, Nancy, about you, but we used to go up to the mountains up there. And at the time, we had a little Chihuahua, and his name was Mickey, although his full name was Michelob Light, which would just tell you sort of what my era of my life was like. September 21st, actually 2 months from this morning, will be 13 years without having a Michelob Light or any drinks in my body, gang. So keep up, doing what you got to do to protect yourselves when that's important. But when it comes out, his name was Mickey, and we would take him up to the mountains. And I texted my wife, I can't think of the name of the mountain that we used to go up to.
Mohonk.
Mohonk. The restaurant up there too, we couldn't afford it. We were college kids, so we couldn't afford the restaurant, but we would have sandwiches, like, and we would see the restaurant, like when we were up there on the waterfall and stuff like that. What a beautiful part of New York. And gang, listen, there are 5 boroughs of New York City. There are two counties out here on Long Island, but then there's a whole state. It's not just the Bronx and then Canada, although some of us downstaters might act as if it is just the Bronx and then Canada. But there's a beautiful, many beautiful parts of New York City, of New York State that don't involve the Empire State Building and the Statue of Liberty. Nancy, so let's dive in. I have some background. I just kind of goofed a little bit about the new Paltz thing, SUNY Albany. I do want to read, but I want this to be your story, but it is your story, but I want to read a little bit about your background, because you've been an advocate in increasing access to geriatric mental health care in this New York region, and have developed outreach strategies in partnership with NYCAging, the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, Mount Sinai, York-Presbyterian Hospital, SAGE Services, which I hope we're going to get into SAGE later on, SAGE Services and Advocacy for GLBT Elders, Visions, I know the gang over Visions, and many other relationships. And I would ask you this, like, I want to hear about you and your background. And eventually I want to get into, I wrote here, partnerships and collaborations, because that's where I live. And that's really where I think a lot of what your success as an organization, and certainly your success as a leader, because when I met with you and your team with regards to the New York City Imagine Awards, it was all that. It was, what you have to understand is Nancy has created these relationships. What you have to understand is Nancy built this infrastructure and all these connections. So I said a lot. I'll try to say less, but I'd like you to take it away now. If you could, Nancy Harvey, CEO of SPOP. I want to get it right. Service Program for Other People, or as you say, SPOP.
SPOP.
SPOP. I like acronyms. I'm big on acronyms. That's why I started doing a hashtag NPSC. That stands for Nonprofit Sector Connector. That's my new acronym. So take it away. What brought you to social work in general? Is there a story there? And then I'm sure there must be something that brings you to being involved in the geriatric community. What is the relationship to that? Because in my experience, I don't think people just say, kind of look down at a book and they go, oh, I'll do that. Or there's usually a catalyst. There's something in their life that kind of helps them on this journey. Can you start there?
Sure, happy to. So yes, I got my undergraduate degree at SUNY New Paltz in sociology, trying to just a general topic that many people majored in my time, and then graduated and was trying to figure out what next. My uncle was visiting from Illinois. He was an architect and urban planner working with the older community. And started talking to me about the work that he's doing, developing housing for senior citizens, and said, this is working with seniors is going to be a growing field. What I think about that? Said, well, it sounds interesting. I don't know what I'm going to do next. And connected me to a number of people in the field that he had been working with in New York. Chatted with them and said, oh, this sounds interesting. And made the decision to go to social work school up in Albany. But I was primarily interested more in the administrative side of things. Okay. Although in school you do obviously take clinical work and learned all about that. But I've always had an interest in more the administrative side, and graduated from SUNY Albany and started my career working in the field of working with older people. But that also, my interest also was always felt a strong connection to grandparents and older folks in my life. And I think a lot of people who go into the field, that's where it comes from, some kind of connection, strong connection. I've always felt an affinity. I've loved hearing people's life stories. I enjoy to this day reading obituaries, not that.
Do you?
I like to hear about people's lives and things that they have accomplished.
I want to ask you about that, because let's talk about that for a second. We're going to come back to obituaries in a second, but right. I do feel like I need to make a shout out. So I'm a product of Nassau Community College, followed up. I graduated from SUNY Old Westbury, both of the state of New York system. And I would say the state of New York has incredible educational systems, gang. And if you are, and not just the state of New York, every state has great, schools and colleges in their university system. And I would just encourage you to check out that stuff as a younger person or somebody who's going back. I mean, I am right on the cusp of going back myself. There's actually a nonprofit program at SUNY Old Westbury, so I'm going to go back and take a couple of courses. But I just encourage, a great education at a much less of a cost. And shout out to the city schools as well, New York City schools, because same thing. But what a cool thing, because the obituary piece there, because it might have been like something where somebody go, what? That's kind of morbid. Why does she want to? But it's there used to be a show on A&E, and I don't even know if A&E is actually a channel anymore, but it was called Biography, and it was a great show. And I do like to read, but I always find myself reading like professional development books, but I much rather either somebody read to me, which doesn't happen as an adult all that much, but unless you use Audible, and I love Audible, but I like to either be told a story or listen to a story or something like that. And that is interesting to me because, actually, I don't know why this is coming up for me, but we go to Hershey sometimes, Hershey, Pennsylvania. And, when you go to these towns, like if you stay at the Hershey Resort or the Lodge, there's like this constant loop of the Milton Hershey story, right? And it's just any of those stories are great because it's someone's life story. So talk to me, when did you decide I'm going to start reading obituaries? That's like, how did that happen?
I can't say I can remember when I decided, but somehow I was drawn to reading about, I find it's interesting to read about people's life stories, things that they've accomplished, things that they've been through throughout their lifespan. And I just find it's fascinating. Yes, of course, it's sad that they're no longer with us, but it's really, I find it just amazing to read about what people have accomplished and in their lives. And so that's where it comes from. It's just interest in hearing what people have done, where they've been, where they've got, throughout their life.
Yeah, I had to Google it while you were talking because I want to find it. There's this poem that refers to the dash when you think of a gravestone. And I didn't know we were going to go in this direction. But it's a poem by Linda Ellis. And I didn't know that either. But the internet's a little slow here. But maybe if I get the poem, I'll read it to everybody when we come back. But the thing is, it refers to the dash between the person's date of birth and their date of death on their tombstone. Because isn't the dash everything? It's not when I got here and when I left. It's what is the story that happened in the middle. And I will do my best to read it for everybody potentially this morning when we come back from a break. So that's interesting to me. I think that draws you to, obviously, as you talk about the work. I remember my grandparents, man, especially my mom's parents, my nana and my pop. And I'm the oldest grandson of 20 grandchildren on that side of the family. Yes, my cousin Mariah, and then me, and then a whole bunch of the rest of us. And I had this certain kinship relationship. I freaking love them and they love me. They love their Tommy D. Like Nana used to say, "You light up my life." Who knew I was going to sing, gang? I knew, but Nana used to sing that song to me, and I miss them a lot. And I find I'm always drawn to. I don't even want to say like seniors. I mean, my father's going to be 72 years old, and I wouldn't even consider him a senior. He runs his own business. Shout out to Papa. Thank you for the Italian ices you donate all the time to my nonprofit friends. That's my dad, Ralph's Ices in Huntington, New York. But I feel like just people of a different era, Nancy. I love connecting because I could just sit for days and listen. And I think not to beat up on us as a society in the States here, because that's a real harsh generalization, but I will say this. I realize that other societies, I think, venerate and respect the wisdom of the elders more, in my experience, than I think we do here. That's just a comment. I don't want to argue with anybody about it. It's just one man's commentary. A guy who spends his days in an attic. So if you don't like what I'm saying, well, it's just one man's opinion in an attic. But I do think that we could have a much better focus on people's stories and the wisdom that people who live life and have experienced a longer dash than those younger people. There's so much there. And I watch my own kids with their grandparents, my parents and my wife's parents, and that connection. It's a different connection. And also those cute phrases about being a grandparent is great because you get to bring them home and drop them off and all that kind of stuff. But it is a different and unique relationship. I love, and I don't do it enough, but I want to go and do some more service work in the senior community. And maybe that actually could be something where you and I will talk about today. So you gave us some background. We are going to go to a quick break, but when we come back, I want you to just fill in how you get to SPOP, how you get to this organization. I mean, you've been leading this organization for a number of years now, 1990, is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So so I want to know when we come back, did you work here first? Did you have experience somewhere else?
Mhm.
And eventually, meaning in this program today, we will get to, speaking of programs, we'll get to your programs. We'll get to the impact, and we'll get to some anecdotal stories, because we're talking about stories, and that's what really, sells, if you will. And we're trying to sell the mission of your organization and talk about how great it is. So if it's okay with you, we're going to take a quick break. We come back, we will just continue this dialogue. Sounds good?
Yep.
We are right back.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business, or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
What really drives success in business? Introducing Intangify, the show that explores the intangible assets that create value and growth. I'm Matthew Asbell, your host and an attorney focused on innovation. Join me Fridays at noon Eastern to discover how innovation, culture, and other intangibles shape thriving companies, from startups to established businesses. We'll share strategies to unleash your business's true potential. Tune in live on talkradio.nyc Fridays at noon Eastern and Intangify your business today.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Nonprofits need connections to move in good directions. So cut through all the static. Join Tommy in his attic.
Oh yeah, come through the static, join me in the attic, but literally don't show up. Like, don't literally, my kids love to use that word literally, like don't literally show up at the house and like climb up the stairs, come in the attic, because it's a good chance I won't even be here. I'm not here all the time, although I act as if I am. Here's the deal. I want to read something to you. I didn't plan this, so I'm just going to go with it. The dash. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of birth and spoke of the following date with tears, but said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time they spent alive on earth, and now only those who love them know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash, although it does feel, this is me, it does feel like that sometimes, but gang, that's not really worth anything. What matters is how we lived and loved and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that still can be rearranged. To be less quick to anger, and show appreciation more and love people in our lives we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering that this dash might only last a while. So when your eulogy is being read with all your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about you and how you lived your dash? Linda Ellis, I don't know you, but I appreciate you. I literally have hair standing up on my arms right now. What a special poem. And Nancy, that's how the show goes. We didn't plan that. We did not plan that, but that just comes up because, you know what, something you said changed something I thought, and now a bunch of people who never heard that poem have heard that poem for the first time. Shout out to Mick Collins. Yes, Mick, you did share on Facebook the correct. That is my dad's Ralph's Italian Ice. It's out in Huntington, Long Island. Love the ices. Mick also shared the website. Mick from Pay It Forward Processing, who's a good friend of me, a good friend of my show, does a lot of work with nonprofits. Nancy, they give back their proceeds, their revenue, their profits rather, to nonprofit organizations. It's a merchant processing company. So you should know Mick. We'll make that happen down the road. All right, let's get back into this story at hand. So you've determined that this is the work you want to go into. Certainly on the administrative side was really what drew you. Why was that? Did you want to run business? Was that how you saw things? Talk to me about that.
No, I mean, I about organizations and how they operate. And so that drew me to that side of things, how I can have an impact on an organization and grow it. I mean, I have a strong interest in the programmatic side of everything. So administrative, but programmatic, developing new programs, bringing new ideas forward. And so that's really my area of interest.
So let me ask you this. So the organization was launched in 1972 and it became independently incorporated in 79, one of the first agencies to focus on behavioral health needs of older adults as a national leader in the field. Now, I can go on about awards of the organization as one of the things like that. What I really want to say is we're talking about the 70s. Now, when we talk about the 70s, from a mental health perspective, and I'm not going to claim to know that I know all the statistics, but there was this evolution in this country, maybe on the planet, but in this country is how mental health was being handled and how prior to, certain medications and prescription meds coming out onto the market, folks were, for lack of a better way of saying it, and I don't mean disrespect, were in institutions, were in hospitals, and they did not leave hospitals. And and then that all changed. So, it seems like your organization has been around to some of that, into some of that history as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And particularly where we were located on the Upper West Side, our physical offices, because back in the 70s, there was an enormous push to discharge people who had been institutionalized for years, which meant many of these people coming out were older now, in their older years. So they had to learn certain. So I have my friend Allison Covino from we were on the show a couple weeks back from Options for Community Living, and one of the things we were talking about it is in July, it's HIV Stigma Awareness Month. Shout out to Options, Yolanda and the team. Saw a bunch of them last week, last Friday night at an event. But it was like this thing where people had to learn the habits. The daily living abilities, right? Like which they maybe never had to do before, and they have to learn some of these things as adults. Absolutely. So our organization, did start back in the 70s and really served, a wide range of older adults who were struggling with mental health issues. So there could be people who, like we just were referring to, who had spent years in psychiatric hospitals or cycled in and out of regular hospitals for mental health issues. And we did develop a program, a day program to support those older adults who had more serious and chronic mental health issues. But we also were hearing from community partners that there was a huge need for mental health services for people as they were getting older, who were beginning to, due to recent changes in their life, were struggling now with mental health issues. So it could be due to health concerns, recent retirement and adjustment to that, loss of a loved one, so bereavement. So there's really a wide spectrum of older adults that we were seeing that had mental health concerns. And so our agency formed a number of different programs and services to meet the needs of a really a diverse population.
Yeah.
Diverse in terms of their mental health needs and concerns, diverse in terms of their backgrounds, because we serve all of Manhattan, and we've grown since then to the Bronx and Brooklyn. But so the communities we were serving were very diverse as well.
Yeah, and I guess diversity of economic situations,
Absolutely.
Right? Not everybody can afford the resources to go see, now, I mean, if you see certain mental health professional and pay out of pocket, These are professionals. These are professionals, and they should be paid for their work. However, sometimes not everybody has the resources to go and
Absolutely
pay those prices. So, talk to me a little bit about, not a little bit, or a lot about. I mean, the when I say community, the community that you've developed, because 24 satellite locations through Manhattan, the Bronx, and Brooklyn. We'll get into all the collaboration and, the PROS program and things like that, which, personalized recovery oriented services, which we can talk about as well. I feel like, and it could be because you and I and your team met a month ago and I did a write-up about this. And what really stood out for me was what you've created in community where, and we could talk about telehealth because I think it's important as well, right? I know that's on your radar. But also, like, what did it look like? Because your team kept saying to me, Nancy created these relationships, created this in community stuff. What does that look like? Can you talk to me like the footprint? What does that mean that you created this network?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I first got to the organization, yes, we had our main offices on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and we've had a wonderful clinic that supported people who were able to come into our offices for mental health treatment. But we were hearing from partners throughout the community, so older adult centers, home care agencies, hospitals, that there was a need, a broader need. And at that time, there was still, and not that there isn't stigma, but there was much more stigma around mental health. And so we came up with the concept of trying to embed mental health services in places that people were comfortable going to. So senior or older adult centers in their communities that they were going for lunch and bingo and whatever other services they got there, that if we could outstation a clinician, a social worker at that site and provide mental health services there, that would have a huge impact and make it accessible, less of a stigma in people's communities. And we began to reach out. We proactively reached out, but we also were hearing from folks throughout the city, there's a real need for the kind of services you have on the Upper West Side in my community, on the Upper East Side.
Right.
And so we developed the notion of these partnerships, of providing the services at locations in the different communities, outstationing our social worker, whether it be 1 to 2 to 3 days a week, depending on the need, in these sites, and providing the same services they would have gotten if they walked in our doors at 91st Street, but in a center that they were comfortable going to, that was in their community, that they could get to easily. And it was very successful. And we started hearing from more centers, oh, I'd like something in my community. Could you come in and do so? So we started developing these satellite locations. So we have a license to provide services, as we are licensed by the New York State Office of Mental Health. And to develop these satellites, you need to get your licenses approved at all these physical sites. And we did that slowly, one by one. We started developing more and more of them in different communities.
And how long has that program of opening up these satellites been going on?
Over 30 years. Wow. We started.
But I guess since we've solved the mental health issue, we probably don't need to open any more satellites, right? Since there's no more mental health challenge crisis in this country. Well, I obviously we're goofing there, Tommy D. But the thing about it for me is that says you can continue to open up these satellites, and I think one of the advantages is these are partnerships. So I don't know how much to share, but I'll just say I think it's the cost of you opening up these satellites as a nonprofit organization. As we know, cost and expenses is always paramount in the discussion, is not necessarily as big as it would be if you were opening up your own centers around the city, right? That's a whole other animal, yeah. That's
absolutely. And we're providing services, as I said, in some really diverse communities. So we mentioned that we're at Visions, we're working with visually impaired older adults. We're working at SAGE with the LGBTQ community. We're in a lot of different communities, which brings mental health to those older adults. And we're really proud of that we're able to make that accessible and available to a broad population.
I love that. And isn't that great? Because you know what, if everybody does what they're best at, and whether this be in business or a nonprofit, if everybody's in their zone of expertise, and they can bring that service, that program to someone else's organization, that organization doesn't have to go out and recreate the wheel, so to speak, but let me just leverage what you do best, and I'll give you the space, to do what you do best, and then we'll collab and we'll say, well, this is working and maybe this isn't working. Maybe, wow, that sounds like, 1 + 1 does not equal 2, and that 1 + 1 equals probably 2,700. I don't know. It's about that sort of leveraging each other's best, and then everybody's better off for it, and ultimately the community gets served. There's some things I want to talk about, when we come back a little bit, the telehealth, and I also want to talk about, what it's been like in the sense of recruiting, and this is from a leadership perspective, really how just straight up it is difficult recruiting individuals in general, period, end of story. Then how difficult it is recruiting to the nonprofit sector. Okay. Then how difficult it is recruiting people to the mental health. Okay. And then recruiting people into the geriatric mental health. So it's like smaller. So you have come up with a strategy and a philosophy and part of your culture as to sort of address some of that, right?
Yes.
All right, let's talk about it when we come back. We'll leave them right on the cliffhanger.
Okay.
Philanthropy and Focus, right back.
Are you passionate about the conversation around racism? Hi, I'm Reverend Dr. TLC, host of the Dismantle Racism Show, which airs every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc. Join me and my amazing guests as we discuss ways to uncover, dismantle, and eradicate racism. That's Thursdays at 11 o'clock a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
In a post-COVID world, you may have many unanswered questions regarding your health. Are you looking to live a healthier lifestyle? Do you have a desire to learn more about mental health and enhance your quality of life? Or do you just want to participate in self-understanding and awareness? I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each Thursday, I will tackle these questions and work to enlighten you. Tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will be frank about health to advocate for all of us.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy and Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time right here on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Nonprofits need connections to move in good directions. So cut through all the static. Join Tommy in his attic.
Right. Philanthropy and Focus. That's it, man. Just look, I'm fortunate enough to hang out with people who lead nonprofit organizations who change the world. I could have said, I'm the hedge fund sector connector, but no, thank you. I want to be the nonprofit sector connector because I hang out with people who change the world and make it a better place. And maybe someday when they're talking about my dash, it'll be, wow, he hung out with people who changed the world. So I want to read this. I don't know if it's plagiarism if you read something you wrote on your own radio show, but we'll just see how it works. One of the communities that is often invisible and whose mental health challenges are not adequately addressed while it has an acute need is our aging population. And that's what we're talking about. And that's, that was from a conversation I had with Nancy Harvey and her team just a couple of weeks ago. And this organization is on the front lines dealing with, or rather serving individuals who are overcoming addiction, who have faced even more trauma as they age, often as their health deteriorates, this becomes more challenging. And then I was even thinking, I think in the terms of like partnership, romantic relationships, or even just friendships as a caregiver, right? And we're all either going to be one or we are one, right? That's just how it is. As older adults who might be caring for a partner or another loved one, it gets even more challenging, and that's a strain on our mental health, right? So there's so many things that are pulling. I mean, I know what it's like to be a 45-year-old man raising 4 children with my wife and running a business and all the other thing, and that is challenging. And when health starts to come in, physical health starts to deteriorate, that makes a whole nother challenge. So what I wanted to go into a little further about programs and things, and then we can talk about, telehealth, and even how telehealth has been a boon to recruiting and this culture that you have of kind of bringing people through. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
All right, take it away.
So, I do want to speak about two other programs that we didn't touch on. We did touch on briefly when I was talking more about the seriously mentally ill and folks that have had chronic mental health issues throughout their life. So we operate the only PROS program, so personalized recovery oriented services program for older adults in New York State.
Wow.
And it's working on not just maintaining people in the community. These are folks, as I said, who were discharged from state psychiatric hospitals or cycled in and out of regular hospitals for mental health issues, and needed the supports to return to life in the community. And so our PROS program, as we call it, has been really successful in working with this population, who really, helping them to reconnect them with, for example, in some cases, employment and reconnecting with family, volunteering in the community. So it's a really special program, and so I did want to give a shout out to that program, and also to our bereavement program, which you have up here.
Yeah. So gang, just let me jump in 1 second, Nancy. So what I'm sharing, let's say you found this as a podcast only, what I'd encourage you to do is I'm just sharing my screen and looking at some of the programs, but you would go to spop.org and then you would look at the programs tab and you would see. That's what I'm sharing for folks who are watching the video.
Absolutely.
So please talk about bereavement, please.
Yeah, so bereavement, we operate a bereavement support program, so it's all volunteers themselves who have been bereaved and have been trained by our staff to operate support groups to help people, whether they have a loss due to a spouse, partner, or unfortunately, say, child or other family member, a loved one in their family. And so we lead these wonderful bereavement support groups that have been really successful in helping people transition back and make connections. Also talking about connections, many of the people who have been in our bereavement support groups have maintained relationships after that, and to help them get reestablished in their life after their tremendous loss. So, we operate a number of different programs, and, I could go on about them, but I think, I'm happy that you've highlighted our website.
Yeah, I want people to go to spop.org, and it's not always common that you can get such a small URL like that.
Right.
spop.org.
Right.
Check out spop.org. Something's coming up for me. I want to just put it out there is, I do a lot of work in the community of individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and it's an interest personally, and it's just a connection of where my heart is in a lot of ways. And I think in terms of, as you talk about this type of work and connections and relationships, I find that in my experience from a vocational perspective, individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities often are unemployed, not because of lack of skill or ability, but rather for a lack of access. So they have so much to give. They just, and shout out to Winter Center for Autism. Christine Ponzio will be on the show next week. I was out there scooping Italian ices with them. It was like 95 degrees. I mean, I was melting. The ice was melting. But no, I had a cooler. I didn't have a freezer. I had a cooler. But I will tell you this. They've now, in their program, just being 1 year old, have helped 120 adults with intellectual developmental disabilities get gainful employment. Right. My point of drawing this parallel here, Nancy, is these seniors have so much more to give too. People are going to live into their 80s and their 90s. Like at you're 65, maybe we're just getting warmed up, man. There's a lot more to give. So, whether it be giving through programs with the bereavement or the PROS program, or however they can give back and be an asset to these communities, then we got to do that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's interesting you bring that up, but we define older, which is funny because nowadays that's not older as 55. So we're serving a really broad spectrum.
That scares me. I that's a decade away. That's older. My kids are laughing because they think I'm an old man right now.
Right. So we're seeing people starting at 55 and going into their 90s. So it's a really, and so people are taking care of.
It's half of a life, though. That's half of a life. We're considering people older for half their life.
Yeah.
You know,
and so it's a big range. And so it's we're seeing people who are still working, people who have worked throughout their life, people who were not, who, as I said, who were perhaps institutionalized. So it's a really diverse population. But I did want to go back to, you mentioned telehealth, and because that's something that's near and dear to us. So before COVID, our agency recognized, particularly with the population we were serving, how valuable telehealth might be. Our client population would struggle sometimes to come in for their service, for their therapy, if it was a snow day, if they weren't feeling well. I could go on for various reasons. And so they have to cancel their appointment. And we were always saying how valuable telehealth would be if we were able to provide this to this population. Unfortunately, before COVID, it wasn't paid for by Medicaid, Medicare, private insurance. Nobody recognized it as something, except for in rural communities. And so with COVID, we say the silver lining has been, first of all, less of a stigma around mental health, and B, the fact that we can provide telehealth services. And we pivoted right when COVID hit. We trained our social workers and staff in the use of telehealth. We didn't think our clients, and this is our ageism, we didn't think our clients would be able to figure out the technology. They did. We worked with them. We used some of our peers to help them to get onto Zoom and how to use the platform. And it kept our client population connected, and new clients coming in throughout the pandemic. We were able to provide telehealth throughout the pandemic.
How has that, and I'm looking at my notes, I'm totally stealing from something I wrote. So how does that also affect, I'm kind of like setting this one up for it, but like, how has that also affected your staff and what it's been, the ability that's given, certainly during COVID when not nobody was going anywhere. I was going to say no one was going nowhere, but that wouldn't make sense because I would say everybody was going everywhere. But when I think of organizations like yours, and probably you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I think of options for community living. Their folks were in. This is not the services that you could provide from. They weren't necessarily like selling health benefits like I do. That could be done from one's home, right? So, I guess my question is twofold: how did this affect your staff during COVID, like to telehealth for them? And then also, what does that look like from the perspective of making their lifestyle better, your employees, and attracting people to the work?
Yeah, I mean, I think, everybody really, amazingly transitioned really well and quickly to the telehealth concept. I think we realized that if we were able to provide this successfully, we'd be able to stay connected with our clients who particularly needed us, because as older people, they were really socially isolated during COVID. And so this was really important. And our staff was really, really dedicated to making sure that they were able to continue to provide services to their population. That really focused on that. We did partially reopen, opened and closed like a lot of agencies throughout the ups and downs of COVID. But at this point, our staff are working partially remote, which I think has made a big difference, like you said, in terms of recruitment and retention. We are, I'd say about 20 to 25% of our clients are coming in for in-person services, and we're there for them if that's what they choose. And staff are coming in 2 to 3 days a week to provide those in-person. We're rotating schedules, so we always have somebody, more than somebody, several staff on site. But we're also providing telehealth for those who want that as an option, or for example, they may think they want to come in, and all of a sudden, as I said, something comes up and they're not feeling well and they want to continue their session, and they'll say, can I switch it to telehealth today?
Yeah. Has that increased your capacity? I mean, if you say 20 to 25% of the people are in person, is that to say that as a result of telehealth being this asset, can you see statistically that you're seeing more people? And are there specific numbers when you look at that?
Absolutely. We can see more people. I mean, one of the models, and we'll probably go back to this, we were the first agency and one of a handful in New York that provided services in clients' homes. So prior to COVID, for those older adults who really could not get out, either due to physical or mental health issues, we would provide mental health support once in their homes. So our social workers went out, our psychiatrists went out. We did stop that during COVID. And we're looking at that again to see if people would be comfortable going back into people's homes, if our client population would be comfortable, if our staff would be. But telehealth, well, obviously, if you're seeing people in their homes, you can see less people. There's travel involved and time involved. With telehealth, we're able to see more people. The phone is ringing quite a bit. I mean, we are finding that we're seeing more trauma since COVID, more grief, anxiety, prolonged isolation, and increased substance use. People who relapse, a lot of relapse.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that when we spoke offline, and and that to me to me it makes sense. Somebody who is quote unquote in recovery. I don't drink anymore, but I think it's just in terms of when folks get low and they're isolated and they, what do they say? What is the antidote for depression? Connection, right? I'll tell you, man, when I'm feeling low, a good old hug makes me feel better. I mean, like connection with people. I will tell you this, which I think I share pretty openly, but like I didn't realize it, but early COVID, I was in some level of mourning, and not to be funny and mock people who lost someone during COVID, but I was mourning my lifestyle, like I was a guy who was on the road, meeting new people, 30, 40, 50 new people, new faces, right? That fed my dopamine in my brain or created that dopamine I needed. And then I didn't have that. And I think that, so think of that in terms of isolation for seniors or someone who's already experiencing some mental health issues. And now I'm alone and I don't have anybody. I mean, I don't want to go back to, when we saw the grandmother or the grandfather looking out of the window of the nursing home and all this stuff, like just where that was the only interaction. But anyway, God, I can't believe that was a part of our life.
Yes.
Not too long ago. That was our life in this COVID era. All right. So to move on, because we could talk about that piece, I'll just kind of rant about it, but we won't now. Let's move on for a second, because we're going to go to one last break. We come back. I think it's critically important to hit upon this piece that you and I have kind of flirted around this morning about, what the program that you have created as what I'll call a pipeline of bringing people into the work, from a licensing perspective and the whole thing. I think you know what I'm talking about, I'm sure, and your team knows what I'm talking about. So we come back, if we could talk about that, because I think that leaves a roadmap for other organizations to be mindful and thoughtful about bringing people through the ranks to create what it is we need, leaders in this space. Is that fair?
Fair enough. Yep.
Let's do it. We'll be right back to close up Philanthropy and Focus, because I always tell you this, we run out of time way before we run out of words. And if you hang out with me, you know that. All right, we'll be right back.
What really drives success in business? Introducing Intangify, the show that explores the intangible assets that create value and growth. I'm Matthew M.S.W, your host and an attorney focused on innovation. Join me Fridays at noon Eastern to discover how innovation, culture, and other intangibles shape thriving companies, from startups to established businesses. We'll share strategies to unleash your business's true potential. Tune in live on talkradio.nyc Fridays at noon Eastern and Intangify your business today.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy and Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Nonprofits need connections to move in good directions. So cut through all the static. Join Tommy in his attic.
We are back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. What you probably didn't know, that I always wanted to be a game show host or maybe a ringleader in a circus. So when I was no animal circus. I'm an animal advocate. So you'll know none of the abused animals. Like maybe the ringleader at Cirque du Soleil. You know, I think that's how you say that word, Cirque du Soleil. But listen, I had when I got married, I had a top hat on. And I had on what they call a morning suit, which is not like it's not tails, but it's like the cutaway on the back, because and I had like a Willy Wonka like walking stick, because why wouldn't you? I'm only going to get married once, and that was that one. Text me for the pictures. Maybe I'll put one up on Instagram. TommyD.NYC on Instagram is where you can find the picture of my wedding, apparently. All right, so Nancy, let's get into that thing there, that piece about how, you know, it's challenging to just to find staff in general, but even more in certain areas.
Absolutely. I mean, I think all nonprofits and businesses in general have been really struggling with recruitment. We have as well, but fortunately, we have found recently we've been able to recruit more people into the field. I mean, I think it's, again, really important that there's some connection to older adults in some way in their lives. We do offer a fair amount of training at our organization to help support people in their growth. If they're a recent graduate, we offer a lot of supervision, which people really value in mental health. So I think that's really important. My board did start an initiative named for me. They put some funds in it to help support new social workers who are or actually people who are looking to go into the social work field. So right now they're offering a scholarship to one of our employees to go to social work school. She was one of the peers in our program. She's always had an interest, and to help her, support her, and to hopefully to keep her employed at SPOP as she graduates as a social worker. So we really try to find different ways to support staff as they come into the organization. But and I think the fact that we have a strong reputation, if somebody is interested in working with an older population and has an interest in mental health, we're one of a handful of organizations that that can offer employment for them. And the supervision that they would want, and the training that they would want to stay and to learn. Yeah, I think
I know a lot of leaders in general. I shouldn't say in general. I know a lot of nonprofit leaders are not so much about them and are about my team and the organization. But you just brushed over something. Did you say the board created this scholarship thing in your name?
Yes.
Can you pretend you're not talking about Nancy, or pretend you are not Nancy? And what does that actually mean, please?
Well, I won't call it the Nancy Harvey initiative. They laugh. I call it the NH initiative. But right. They funded it. I guess it was 2 years ago now. Putting in money to help grow the field. Yeah. So that we recognized how important it is to bring new and younger, or people of any age, really, into the field. And to support them. And some people that meant monies to be able to go back to school, to get a degree, or to get to further their education. And so people can apply within the organization for support. And the first grant that was given, actually, she was given it twice because she's now in her second year of social work school. So one of our peers who was really interested in going to social work school and supporting her education, and that those funds helped her to be able to pay her tuition and to stay in school.
So this is somebody who, sorry to interrupt, this is somebody who's already been in your organization, has a connection to the work, has a connection to this community, and then the organization says, and I will call it the Nancy Harvey Initiative, because I can.
Okay.
Because I got a little ego myself. It was a Tommy
Okay.
D initiative. I would call it the Tommy D initiative.
Okay.
But so that initiative is focused on bringing people who are already in the work through and helping them level up, career up, right? Get the certification, get the degree.
Absolutely.
That's big. That's really, really important. So
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it, NH initiative or Nancy Harvey initiative, whatever you decide, the point is it is important and it's making a difference. I have another question too, and we have no time left, so we got to make this fast.
Right.
Is there any events that are coming up that you want to shout out that we should be aware of?
There are no specific events, although I will share with you, we just got the link. We just came back from a fantastic conference where we got to present in Greece, sponsored by a very large foundation. And we just got the video of the presentation. So
Okay.
I'll make sure to share that with
Where is that? Is that going to be on your website or is that?
Yeah, we're going to get it on our website. We just got the link. So I will share that because it talks about the importance of the work we're doing. Two comments. We want to make sure that people are rejecting negative stereotypes about aging and that they're viewing each person as an individual, not an age.
100%.
Those are two important things I want to get out there.
100%. Rejecting negative stereotypes about
aging and view each person as an individual, not their age.
We would change most of the problems in this world if we just viewed individuals as individuals and stopped trying to put people into freaking groups. There's only one group. The human group, right? Like that's a group.
Agreed.
Start dissecting it. Look at everybody as individuals. And maybe even me saying the human group is wrong, right? So it probably is just, right?
You got what I'm saying. So
right. I'm a 45-year-old man. I am not the same as most 45-year-old men, and most 45-year-old men are not going to do it what this guy does. So it's just different. So individuals, super, super important. One last question before we go, and we got literally a minute to do it. Last week, I was with my friend Lauren Vlachos at Alzheimer's Dementia Resource Center in Long Island, however you say it. I've only lived here 45 years. I think it's on Long Island. How does this relate quickly, if you could, to cognitive issues and mental health and that piece? I know I didn't give you a lot of time.
Yeah, I mean, we are seeing people, unfortunately, that we started serving and throughout, they've been with us for many years and started experiencing some cognitive decline, begin early stages of Alzheimer's. I mean, it is hard to be able to provide therapeutic sessions once they get into a certain stage, but we do work with people with early stage and then refer them to partners that we know in the community.
That's what I figured.
And it's connecting people to support groups, to therapists, to people who are skilled in working with this population.
And that's what I figured you'd say, because that's what it is. Everybody stay in your lane to the best of your ability and connect and refer out and then receive those referrals right back in. The website is SPOP.org, SPOP.org. And I did mention Lauren Vlachos, Alzheimer's Dementia Resource Center. I'll share her information, the organization on Facebook in a second. And then look to connect with me. It's TommyD.NYC on Instagram and the whole thing. Nancy, anything you want to leave them with before we go?
No, just thank you for this opportunity to speak with you and share our story. And again, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
I feel like I made a new friend and I appreciate that. I hope we stay connected. Thank you to your team, Janet, and everybody else for making this happen. And listen, thank you, Logan, for doing a great job on the production side. And thank you, Mom and Dad, for creating me. Because if you didn't create me, then I couldn't be here to make all the changes I'm making. All right. Make it a great day, everybody. I'll see you later. Bye.
Nonprofits need connections to move in good directions. So cut through all the static. Join Tommy in his attic.